So I want to preface this video by saying that I'm an absolute Pokemon fanatic, and although I wish I didn't have to compare these two franchises, I kind of have to. I love Pokemon, I love Yokai-Watch. This video is kind of a history slash bringing light to Yokai-Watch slash I just love the games, so I want to talk about them rolled into one. So I hope you enjoy. Let me take you back to 2011's Tokyo Game Show. Level 5 announces a brand new IP, Yokai-Watch. Yokai-Watch is a 3DS monster collecting RPG where you play as a young boy and you run around a town collecting monsters and using them to battle. So that sounds very similar to another franchise, right? Yes, but Yokai-Watch did things a little bit differently. You see, the term yokai, if you weren't familiar, isn't actually a made-up word like Pokemon is. It is a real Japanese word that it uses to describe supernatural entities and spirits, which is what the monsters in Yokai-Watch are based off of, real folktales of Japanese culture. This is why to many fans outside of Japan, some of these monsters might look a little bit differently. So take this for example. This is Manjima, a befriendable creature in this game. So he is absolutely horrendous, but that's by design. This creature is based on the Jin Menken, a Japanese folklore of a dog with a human face. So you would not expect the Pokemon to look like this at all, but in Yokai-Watch, he's incredibly fitting for the style of the game. In fact, that's what sets it apart from the competition. It had a fresh take on monster design that no one's really done before. Take your culture's folklore and tales that already exist in monsters that have already been depicted and turn them into cutesy, funny looking creatures for kids to not only learn about the past and learn about their folklore and their culture, but also have these goofy designs that you wouldn't really find elsewhere. So Pokemon has these very Pokemon-y, for a lack of a better word, designs, right? They have these shapes and these certain like looks that make them, you just know that they're a Pokemon. You see them and you're like, oh, that's a Pokemon. Digimon had the whole techie, put lasers on everything, and well, Yu-Gi-Oh had that very edgy designs, but no one was really doing it like Yokai-Watch was. Their designs were fresh, they were new, they were something that had never been done before. And as upsetting as it sounds, I do think that this fresh take was what eventually led it to its downfall. Not only were the designs very fresh and very unique, the gameplay was as well. The gameplay was simple but very addicting. It placed up to 6 of your befriendable yokai into a roulette wheel of sorts, and you could have up to 3 yokai in a battle at once. The yokai automatically attacked, and it was the player's job to spin the wheel and to select the 3 best yokai for any given situation. The players also managed items and used ultimate attacks, which involved doing a little minigame in the bottom screen. It was fun, it appealed to many different ages and audiences. The gameplay never really got repetitive as you were always doing something different. Whether you were in the bottom screen doing a bunch of different little mini games, trying to put a bunch of different ultimate attacks on screen, or you were managing items, it almost was like an RTS vibes a little bit because your yokai were constantly attacking and your job was to manage everything around it. So it blended this strategy, this RTSC, this collection and monster collection, and it blended it well together, and it was a pretty fun battle system that only got refined from the beginning. So the monster designs were very unique, the gameplay was very unique. What about the setting? Did it stand out in the setting too? Well, I think so. The game was set in just a single town, but it gave this sort of earthboundy feel where you find adventure in ordinary places type of thing. It used the familiarity of an everyday place to its advantage, by making the player explore museums at night or abandoned houses or even just downtown. It was a unique map filled with content that made the game really fun to play. And you mix that with a good combat system and very unique monster designs, and you have a recipe for success, right? Well, it depends on your idea of success. It sold well for sure, its first week selling 53,000 units, and it would have been the best selling game for that week had it not released the same week Pikmin 3 did, but it did sell well. It even got an anime series which spiked the sales as well, and in the end it was able to surpass that 1 million sales mark, right before its sequel released, Yokai-Watch 2. And the fact that Yokai-Watch 2 exists in the first place is a sign that the game did garner enough of an audience to turn this game into a franchise. And the second game sold well enough to warrant a third game, as well as a localization of the first game to the West in 2015, which specific sales data isn't available, but it was able to sell around 400,000 copies or so by the end of its life cycle. So it sold well, and the anime even got an English dub and started airing on Disney XD. We also eventually got the sequels, Bony Spirits and Psychic Specters, as well as a spin-off title and the third game in the series. And that's when the downfall of the series came, at least internationally. See, Yokai-Watch 3 sold a measly 4,000 copies in the US. And despite horrible sales, the Yokai-Watch series wasn't dead, at least not in Japan. Yokai-Watch 4 was a Switch game that was released exclusively in Japan, and it did decently well over there. And it did decent enough where Level 5 promised a Western release during Anime Expo 2019. However, that was the first and last time we've ever heard of that localization since. Because then came the bad news. Level 5 announced that its North American branch for all their IPs was gonna close, and they proceeded to close that same year, 2019. Quickly, the series lost its traction, as fast as it gained it. Soon, Yokai-Watch 1 copies were being sold at Five Below, and merchandise was quickly thrown on clearance, and before you knew it, any sign that Yokai-Watch existed in the West in the first place seemed to vanish. So what went wrong? What happened and what could have been prevented? Although there's no concrete reason, there are many hints to uncover the reason why Yokai-Watch never really took off as much as it should have in the West. The first one, and the one that saddens me of course, is Pokemon. You often hear mentioned that competition is good for the consumer. If something comes along that is offering something better or different than another thing, that forces the other thing to adapt and get better as well. It forces the industry to evolve and get better instead of getting stagnant. So why didn't that apply here? Well, it's very simple. Pokemon just didn't see Yokai-Watch as a competition because it didn't need to. Yokai-Watch simply didn't hold the torch to the biggest media franchise in the entire world. And instead of being threatened or challenged, it simply ignored Yokai-Watch and went on its way. This isn't David versus Goliath, this was David versus 100 Goliaths armed with guns. It was an impossible mountain to climb, but it gave a valiant effort for what it's worth. It's clear that the average person in North America would look at Manjima and not think, wow, what a unique, fresh take on Japanese folklore. It would look at Manjima and think, what the hell is that creature with glasses? This game looks dumb. Yokai-Watch is a game that wears its culture on its sleeve, and it didn't change just for a different audience, and although if it did, it might have seen better sales, it would have lost what it is. It wouldn't have been Yokai-Watch. Its biggest downfall was what made it so unique in the first place. Despite not being able to gain the popularity it deserves, the Yokai-Watch RPGs continue to this day to be some of the most fun, content-filled monster collection RPG content you can play. And as a Pokemon super fan, I would even argue that they are more fun than your standard Pokemon RPG. It wasn't afraid to break the mold and be its own thing, and although it eventually led to its own death, it was able to carve a small, niche but dedicated fan base in the process. So, is there hope for the future? Well, maybe. In the latest Nintendo Direct, which was only a few days ago from the time of this recording, February 8th to be exact, not one, not two, but three Level 5 games were announced to be coming to the Switch sometime this year. The same Level 5 that closed its offices is back and creating games again. None of the games announced were Yokai-Watch related at all, but seeing them here again just gives us hope that we might one day see the fabled Yokai-Watch 4, or even future games in the franchise. But time will tell, and for now Yokai-Watch will stand as the greatest monster collection RPG that never was.